Hello and welcome, my friends. If you have questions about your spiritual awakening or just wondering what one might look like, you're in the right place. Today we have the distinct pleasure of interviewing the founder of Finding Joy and Purpose, my personal friend, John Anson. My pleasure to be here, John. We'll be discussing his spiritual awakening, as many commonly term the experience, what it was that brought him to this experience, the struggles, triumphs, and the realizations that he experienced along the way. So stick around for part one of this three-part series. A light, fun, and informative start on what one person's and perhaps your spiritual awakening might look like. Please take a moment to drop a comment in the section below discussing your spiritual awakening if you experienced one, or what your perceived notions of one might currently be if you haven't. Today I'm here with John Anson. This is strange. Founder of Finding Joy and Purpose, and we're discussing spiritual awakenings, in particular his. We all know just as there are no two individuals that are identical, neither are their spiritual awakenings, but there do seem to be quite a few similarities along the way. So today I invited John here to share his experience and story with the world. Yeah, this is kind of weird. You realize we are the same person, right? I'm not having deja vu again? If we could just stay on topic here, seriously, I was the only one who was willing to do the interview. My apologies. Please proceed. All right, John, why don't we just start out with discussing a little bit about your background. Give us a bit of your story. Well, let's see. I could probably consume an hour and a half with my background. I am formally educated. Not that anybody probably really cares too much about that, but I am formally educated. I have my bachelor's degree in finance, so that proves I can learn things. My experience in life, my experiences in this life consist of, my professional experience has been in retail sales for the bulk of my career. I was in the automotive industry. I was a general sales manager of a car dealership. I have worked for myself on and off, various different jobs, but for the most part, my work history has, it seems, our culture likes to identify with work, is been in retail sales. But you're more than likely asking in relation to the topic about my background. So my personal belief in everything that I'm going to say today is just that. They're just my own perception, my own beliefs, my own point of view, and everybody's is unique to themselves. So take it for what it is. I've always, throughout all of the various, I shouldn't say even all of the various different careers that I've had. I've only had a few. And again, as I mentioned before, they've all been in sales in some way, shape, or form. And I honestly believe that most everything that we do in this culture that we live in, especially in America, is sales in some aspect. So I've always been a very motivated person. I've always had a lot of drive, and so I've always pursued self-improvement, whether it's physically, mentally, emotionally, psychologically, whatever the case may be. I've continually done research throughout my life to try to improve upon myself, and I'll kind of get back into that a little bit and how that links in with my awakening. And that whole chase and pursuit, that ego-motivated pursuit, and ego not in the conventional term that most people are familiar with it as, I'm sure most of the viewers are aware. But ego just in the sense of the idea of who we are, that's created throughout our lifetime, through our childhood, at educational institutions, religious upbringing, and parenting, for that matter as well. Absolutely. So the long and the short of it is, went to high school in just a very, very small town, graduated with 60 people. I did well in school in terms of, the educational system. I was a model student, straight A's, graduated third in my class, had a full scholarship to go to Clarkson University, and was a pretty diligent student, but a pretty heavy partier too when I was growing up throughout those years. I wouldn't say heavy when I was young, but to some degree. So I graduate high school, I go to college, I really become a professional at partying and socializing and fine-tuning those skills, and using alcohol to kind of come out of my shell and combat a lot of those insecurities that I had developed throughout my childhood and had been influenced by society as well, of my image and who I thought I should be and who I really was. So alcohol has always been a struggle for me, and later on in my life it became very, very a huge battle and a major component of my awakening. So after I graduated college, I got settled down, and growing up, my relationship with my father was quite distant. He grew up very poor, and he had literally, in my perception, no relationship with his father or mother, really, for that matter. He was one of 7 children, and he did the best that he could. And as I kind of went through that part of examining my childhood and realizing how I was raised impacted my makeup, of my egoic makeup, both my parents just really did a wonderful job with the tools that they had been given. So anyways, my relationship was quite distant with my father. He rewarded me a lot monetarily because he was never given those things. He never really learned how to love, and so he expressed it through giving me things. And we weren't rich by any means of the term, but he would give whatever he had to us to express his love towards us. And I just, as a child, that doesn't process. I wanted more, and a long story short, again, is what I ended up learning was that's how you express love. So in seeking love throughout my life and seeking that fulfillment, I did the same thing with my relationships and with my career. So my career was, super important to me, and that's what defined me as a man, how much money I made, what I could provide. I still held true to a lot of, I think, core values that I was taught, to be a man of your word, to be trustworthy, to be a gentleman, things of that nature. But ultimately, what I could give people was how I derive my value. And as as most people know, that's you're filling a bottomless pit, basically. So I pursued that for a long time and chased that for a long time. My alcoholism became worse and worse and worse as I think began to realize, and I almost even remember this point in time that I said to myself, this is it. This is as good as it's going to get. It's not going to get any better than this. And I was like 30 years old because I was making a ton of money and I had pretty much anything that I wanted. And so I just started drinking a ton. And things spiraled out of control. I ended up going into a treatment program. And, I think as we look back on things in our past and how we arrived at where we are today, especially for those that have experienced a spiritual awakening, it all makes sense. And that's part of how you know that. I think that for me, I knew that I had an awakening because it all made sense, and I was grateful for everything that did happen and occur. But I ended up getting several DWIs. I ended up losing my job. I ended up pretty much losing everything. And again, I think that that's a big portion for many people of this process is loss. I ended up going to prison. I spent just over 3 years in jail and prison, and there were several months in which I was completely alone. I wasn't in solitary confinement, but I was confined to a cell for extended periods of time. And people who are familiar with the process know how that works in prison. I had everything kind of, I lost everything. And I was sitting in a cell alone, and I couldn't communicate with my family, and I had lost everything that I had thought defined me as a person, as a human being, as a man, as a provider, as someone who loves somebody. I was financially ruined. My relationship was in shambles. And I said to myself, I'd known all along that the power, that we have very unique capabilities as human beings, as individuals, to determine our own state of being. And I said, I'm going to determine that I will live my life in joy despite my circumstances. If you're familiar with Viktor Frankl, I've read a bit about him and his experience in a Jewish concentration camp, and how he made it through that, and how he rose up from the situation. And that was a big a motivator, and helped me a lot when I was in that situation where I couldn't read, and all I had were my thoughts and figuring out how to find peace. And while I was there, after I'd been, in that situation and made that decision, basically, that, I was choosing happiness, I was choosing joy, and I was choosing appreciation, in everything, and freedom, that, and Viktor Frankl mentions this, one of the things that always stuck out with me was, he viewed himself as more free than his captors or his imprisoners. And when I realized that, things began to click for me. So in that process and in my time there, I did get the great opportunity to pick up the book A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle. Well, folks, that's all the time, unfortunately, that we have for today, but we will be back in 2 weeks for part 2 of this very, very interesting series. John, do you have any last words? My quick last word, and you've probably heard this before, but it is to thine own self be true. And I can go into a little bit more detail on that when we do the next video. Thank you so much for joining us today, and the cheesy format that I did with talking to myself. I know it's a serious topic, and I don't mean to make light of it, but I just thought it'd be fun because you gotta laugh. So I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, please click subscribe. Please share with your friends if you think this can help somebody. That's why I'm doing it. And we'll be back in 2 weeks with part 2. So thank you so much, and may peace be with you.